You are listening to the Hiking Radio Network, where we talk the walk with shows by hikers, about hikers, for everybody.
Mighty Blue on the Appalachian Trail, the ultimate midlife crisis. Join Steve and his guests every week as he staggers from Georgia to Maine.
Hi guys and girls, and thanks as always for coming back to the show. You're listening to Mighty Blue on the Appalachian Trail, the ultimate midlife crisis, a show where my guests prove beyond any doubt at all that I wasn't completely crazy to hike the Appalachian Trail for a second time this year. If there is a single thread that runs through this podcast, it is the supreme love of this trail that manifests itself in my conversations with my guests. I'd happily interview anybody with a counter view, but I really haven't come across anybody who loathes the AT. Perhaps if you know somebody, you could get in touch with me and I'll ask them all about it. This week we have yet another convert to the trail. Dianne Seger, or Lady Di, was somebody I met this year, and I was immediately struck by her resourcefulness and independence. She's another of those fearless women of a certain age who took on the trail this year. Remember, I'm putting together a show for next year with somebody from this very demographic, and Dianne is one of the people who influenced my thinking in this. Dianne will be on soon. In our Mighty Blue Class of 2019 debrief, I catch up with Tina Dunaway, who started a little after me in very early March. We didn't meet on the trail, but I enjoyed catching up with her this week. She has a compelling story to tell. Tina will be here after Dianne. Finally, we've arrived at Chapter 7 of Paul Stutzman's excellent book, Hiking Through. I've been really encouraged by the emails I've got from you about how much you're enjoying the reading of this book. It has also been noted that the book is quite spiritual, and I'm, well, not in the least bit spiritual. As I've mentioned before, this is somebody else's story, and I'm reading it out to you. Just because I don't believe doesn't mean that I can't be moved by a man's spiritual path. In fact, this was one of the early books I read, and I remain as enthralled by it today as I was when I first read it, about 10 or 12 years ago. So let's get on and meet my friend Dianne Seger, or Lady Di. Well, we're on with another class of 2019 member, not the Mighty Blue class of 2019, but the class of 2019, Dianne Seger, or Lady Di. How are you, Lady Di?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm pretty good. And I finished a little bit before you, and you are a very recent finisher. When did you actually summit Katahdin?
October 5th.
October the 5th. How long ago? Let me think. What date are we today? Oh, it's Saturday.
So this is the 12th, so a week ago today. Mm-hmm.
Wow. Are you recovered yet? Do you feel a bit better?
No, I feel achy. My body's in shock. It doesn't know what to do when it's not walking 15 miles a day. So
how are you coping with that? It's funny because I resolved to myself that when I got back, I would start exercising. I've been a nightmare. I found it so difficult to get back into exercise. I've started walking this week. I've walked about 3 or 4 miles a day for the last week now, so that's not so bad. It is some sort of shock when you stop, isn't it?
It is. It is. Your body just isn't used to the sudden change, I think.
Yeah. So are you doing any exercise?
Well, not much. I'm in Minnesota. It's snowing today.
Oh gosh.
And my plan was to rest a few days, and it's been more than a few. But I'm gonna start exercising. I think it'll be important.
Yeah, I don't think any of us realize the impact it does have on us until we get back, because I think we get into that mindset that this is what the body's supposed to do. You know, every day get up and walk, and suddenly we don't do that anymore, do we?
Right.
So you summited the other day. When did you actually start the hike?
February 21st.
So why did you choose to start so early?
Well, a couple of things. I wanted to give myself lots of time to finish.
Right.
And I coordinated the trail with a retirement. I retired on a Friday and hit the trail the following Thursday.
Yes.
And I knew that, I'm of a certain age, and I knew I had to ramp up slowly and get in shape slowly, and I didn't want to injure out. I knew I needed to give myself lots of time. So I did. I mean, my first day on the trail, I only went about 7 miles and didn't actually make it to Springer.
Oh my gosh.
I stayed in the Black Gap shelter. Is that the one just before Springer? I stayed there my first night.
Well, we did actually interview one guy once who actually took 3 days on the approach trail. So But he was 400 pounds and he eventually lost about 180 pounds. So he did really well in the end. So you started early and you told me when we spoke about this yesterday that your first 3 days were both cold and wet, which is not a good combination, is it? How was that for you?
Yeah, the way I remember it is it was like 38 or so Fahrenheit during the day and raining most of the first 3 days. And then, of course, at night it would get below freezing. So I had to sleep with my water filter and all that. But I also knew that it would get better because I knew it was going to get warmer. It was actually, and another reason I started early is because I didn't want to do winter at the end. I thought I'd rather do it at the beginning when I'm still excited about the trail. So, joke's on me. I was out there over 7 months, so I saw a little bit of winter at the end as well.
But you also saw the colours, though, didn't you?
Oh, absolutely! It was
that
beautiful.
Must have been fabulous because I know because I started a month earlier this time. I started in February as well, and this time when I got to Maine, there were no colours there. So not that it was disappointing because I loved being in New Hampshire and Maine in July and August. That was lovely, but really those colours are spectacular, aren't they?
Yeah, and I was in southern Maine when it was at peak, when the color was at peak. It was beautiful, just beautiful.
So you started early and it was cold and wet. And in those 3 days, you obviously went to bed every night. Did you consider quitting or were you second guessing your starting time or were you always thinking it's going to get better?
No, the only time I actually had thoughts of quitting was when I got to the whites, I think, because they killed my knees. But at the beginning, I was very enthusiastic about this whole thing. And like I said, I knew it would get better. I'm from Minnesota. I'm used to cold weather.
Yeah.
People say, oh, you're from Minnesota, that this doesn't bother you, but we still have blood in our veins, So it was uncomfortable, but I knew it would get better at the beginning.
And did you find, I certainly found that trying to even boil water, which I know you dehydrated a lot of your food. I mean, I just bought the stuff in packs and so on, but boiling the water in the morning when it's freezing cold is difficult, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. It really is. And ironically, I was thinking about going stoveless towards the end of my hike when it was getting cold again. Right. Because in spite of the fact that I really like warm food and I love hot coffee in the morning, especially when it's cold, what I found is that I was actually cooking breakfast less often when it was cold because I didn't want to sit around and wait for the water to boil. Right. I mean, it's much easier to just get moving and stay warm by moving. I sometimes didn't even stop for lunch. I would just eat while I walked when it was really cold. So, that was something I learned on trail is that if it's really cold, hot breakfast isn't necessarily the first priority. Sometimes getting moving is.
You're probably right. Especially, I remember once sitting there in the Smokies, of course, when it had been snowing, and it was. I took 25 minutes for the water to boil.
Right,
I was bloody frozen. It was a nightmare. It was an absolute nightmare. Yeah. So if you were ever to do this again, which I suspect you won't, because most people aren't stupid enough to do it again like I was, do you think that February is a good time to start? If you're giving advice to somebody, when somebody said to you, in retrospect, what would be a good time to start this hike? When would you say?
Well, I think if I have any regrets about how I did this hike, the only one I have is I should have done it 40 years ago. But I'm satisfied with having started early and having put up with the cold weather early, just because it would give me enough time to really take my time and take a lot of zeros, take time off, do short days, don't chase miles. I just didn't want to injure out. And so as far as advice, if people are younger, I would say March is a better time to start.
Yeah, because they tend to go faster than us, don't they? Us older people.
Or even April.
Well, apparently that used to be the traditional time to start was April. So, and I don't regret my start in February at all. I'm really glad I did it the way I did it as well.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I'm fine with that.
And I can't say that I felt this first time, but when did the enormity of what you were achieving sink in? Did it sink in? Is it starting to sink in now? Or in my case, it started sinking in while I was doing the 100-mile wilderness. I felt this is it. I know I'm nearly there. And I know I'm going to make it now. Has it started to sink in yet? Or, did you start realizing how enormous this was before the end?
I mean, I think I realized gradually and at different points. I remember Harper's Ferry, the psychological halfway point, I cried when I got there.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Why?
Well, partly because it was timing. I think it was a Friday, and I think I did over 20 miles that day, and I didn't often go over 20, but I figured out at some point that if I could do 5 more miles in a certain amount of time, I could get there before they closed.
Right.
So I wanted to get there before they closed. So I was really hurrying at the end, and it was a long day, and it was hot. And then, there's something about getting halfway that meant something more than any of the earlier milestones, the hundreds, 1, 2, 3, 400 mile marks and all that stuff.
I think the 1,000-mile mark was pretty special.
Yeah, it was absolutely. And then another one that was really special and emotional for me was when you have 500 miles left, that little sign that says 500 miles to go.
Which isn't 500
Which isn't
miles,
right. No, of course, none of them are right, but it doesn't matter.
But it's important to have those little pictures of yourself by that 500-mile mark,
Absolutely.
isn't it? In your mind, you think you've only got 500 miles to go. And when you think about I remember thinking, it's only 500 miles to go.
Yeah.
But,
exactly.
Only 500? That is a heck of a long way. So what was it that first propelled you to do the AT? It's not everybody's idea of a perfect retirement. Why did you start to do it in the first place?
Well, I really didn't start backpacking until about, I don't know, maybe 2010. And I kind of got into it. My sort of backyard trail is the Superior Hiking Trail in Minnesota, and it's a little over 300 miles long. And I've hiked that maybe a week at a time. And, I've hiked it all, some of it 4 or 5 times, but never all at once. All right. And so I actually kind of got interested in the AT, just reading stuff, I guess. And in 2017, I took 3 weeks off work and went and did a lash, from Springer to Fontana Dam. Right. Because I wanted to do a big chunk of the AT and kind of get it out of my system. And being from the Midwest, I'd never hiked any part of the AT.
Right.
I remember saying many times, I'm glad I don't live near the AT, because if I got close to home, I'd want to get off. But the 3 weeks on the AT in 2017 just made me realize, I felt so good at the end of it. And I thought, it would be fun to really tackle this thing. And so I had to go home and work a couple more years before I could retire and actually go do it. And so this was my retirement transition plan, so to speak.
So it really was quite a build up to it. Did you find yourself having to buy extra gear, different gear, because from doing a good lash like that's quite a considerable distance, which of course, by the way, leaves you just short of the Smokies, doesn't it?
Right, that's right.
So you weren't ready for that. And we'll come back to that in a minute. Did you have to change your gear, or did that lash educate you in what you really needed for the AT?
Well, the lash and also the hiking I've done before kind of educated me in what I need. Also, I sleep in a hammock. I slept in a hammock all the way through, and everything but the rain fly I made myself. So I make my own underquilts and top quilts and hammocks and suspension and stuff. And so I started out with sort of winter weight down, on my hammock. And then in May, I actually went home because my daughter graduated from college, and I was home for 2 weeks. And that's when I traded out for lighter summer gear. And then I actually traded back to winter gear when I got to Hanover. So I went from winter gear to summer gear to winter gear. Which, yeah. And it worked fine. It worked fine.
So you went home for 2 weeks. And this has made me, I had to go home, and we had a couple of similarities. My first hike, I got cellulitis, and I know you got cellulitis on this hike. Yeah, we'll come back to that in a minute. But was there anything about being at home that made you think to yourself, I don't really want to go back? Did you start getting comfortable again, or did you find yourself back at home waiting to get back out to the AT again?
Well, kind of both. I love the magic of turning something and having hot water come out whenever you want it. And,
Isn't that a miracle?
It's a miracle, and not having to dig cat holes. There's all kinds of things I loved about being, and turning a button and it gets warmer or colder, But at the same time, it was by the end of that 12 days or whatever I was home, I was anxious to get back to the trail. And it was kind of a hard transition both ways. When I came home, I remember walking around my house thinking, why do I have all this stuff? All these belongings. I've got a 3-bedroom house with a bunch of stuff in it, when I'm actually capable of living with what I can carry on my back. So that was an important realization and experience of the trail.
Well, I found actually, as far as that's concerned, and look behind me. this is not very good for podcasting because people can't see this, but behind me, as you can see, I've got
books.
I've moved into a new place. I've got books and board games. I've got tons of board games. I collect them, and it's just stuff I've collected over the years. I didn't take a single one of these things with me on my trip. I didn't need them at all. And you do learn to live with different stuff. Has that made you think about what you may do going forward? Do you think it's formed your view about what your next few years might be like?
Well, every time I go on a backpacking trip and I come home, I review what I've got in my pack. And it's always an exercise to see what did I take that I didn't use. Right. And rather than what do I need to bring, I'm always looking at what can I leave behind, because you're trying to get lightweight as much as you can. And, I think hiking really helps you separate your needs from your wants. I'm not quite exactly sure what the future looks like for me because, again, I'm just really beginning my retirement now.
This is week 2, isn't it? In fact, your retirement.
Yeah.
Week 2.
Exactly. It's week 2 of my retirement. Yeah. So into the future, I'm actually going to do some consulting and a little bit of part-time work. I'm eventually at some point going to downsize, and I'm not quite sure what that looks like because, I've got a single family home. I'm probably going to downsize, but I'm not sure. I even toy with the idea of going on the road in a van for a year and doing some traveling and not even having a home for a while.
That would be awesome. I'd love to do that myself. That would be absolutely awesome.
Yeah, that's one of the options. Or maybe downsize to a townhome or maybe a cabin up north. I'm not even sure yet.
Yeah, but the great thing about retirement is you can do what you like, can't you?
That's right.
So that's the marvelous thing. Now, I think I mentioned to you that we're soon going to be starting another podcast soon. And funny enough, it's about a woman over 50 hiking the AT in 2020. Mm-hmm. And you're a woman over 50, and I know you had your birthday on the trail. Do you think and this is not meant to be a sexist question, but do you think there are specific challenges that demographic needs to consider when getting into a long distance trail like the AT, or do you just feel you're just the same as a guy over 50 and a young kid, or are there specific things you had to address when you were out there?
I don't know if this is a politically correct answer, but I think one of the things that probably women of a certain age need to overcome isn't the difficulty of the trail. It's the absorbed messages we've been told about what we're capable of, and society's response to it. So many people said to me, you're not going alone, are you? You're going to hike. Are you going to take a gun? And
every person's been asked that question, by the way.
So you may have to edit this out. But somebody said, "Well, you've got to take protection." I said, "What? You think I need to carry condoms?" So.
Well, that's definitely staying in. That is definitely staying in, Lady Di, I tell you. Especially as I shared a room with you, by the way.
Yeah, exactly. So I think there's nothing about this that can't be done. Being stubborn helps. Being in good shape helps. But even letting the trail get you into shape by starting slowly is an option.
I think that's the best option. Let it get you into shape.
Yes.
You will get the physicality. I keep saying that to people. You think you can't do it, but you will do it. You didn't make all the way up Springer the first day. So what?
Right. Exactly.
You did second day, didn't you? So
exactly.
Fine.
Yep. And I think probably, the self-confidence and the willingness to get outside of your comfort zone, the willingness to do something that might seem kind of brave to you. And again, all those messages about, you shouldn't do this alone, or aren't you afraid of people, or isn't it going to be dangerous for you, is something I think particularly women have to overcome that men may not have to as much.
But there was never a time, I suspect, I hope anyway, that you ever, you always felt comfortable in your surroundings when you were there, with both the people and the places you're at, didn't you?
Absolutely. I never felt in danger. I said the only creature I'm afraid of on the trail is a tick, because I don't want the diseases that they might carry. But I've never, the trail is kind of a microcosm. There's a variety of people there. But I said many times that in any metro area, when the bars close down at night, you're in more danger than you would be anywhere on the trail.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So were there favorite places on the trail that you found?
That is so hard. I think what I loved most about the trail was the community, the way it socially leveled everybody. it doesn't matter if you're old or young or rich or poor or what you did for a living. The conversation is about injury and, and rain and weather and food and poop. Yeah, exactly. What goes in and what comes out. Right?
Exactly. Yeah.
And, it just makes life so simple. And I think the trail is the only place where people in their 20s and people in their 60s can become fast friends. And nobody thinks anything of it.
Yeah. Oh, and that happened a lot, didn't it?
It did.
I know that we spoke. Actually, I recorded you at Standing Bear Farm, and I actually listened to that recording back this morning. And you referred to the Smokies at the time as beautiful and brutal.
Yes.
And they really were, weren't they?
They were fabulous views, but like walking over ice and snow and stuff. Yeah, it was tough. Yeah.
Well, then I was listening back and making notes this morning that you said that heights scare you.
Yes.
Well, in that case, how do you get on with the whites?
I learned to look where I was walking and only look around once I stopped.
Good idea.
Because the edges and the cliffs and stuff are pretty scary. But, I loved it. I mean, it was the whole trail for me put me outside of my comfort zone on a regular basis, such that became the new normal.
Mm-hmm. And really, the first 17 or 1800 miles are preparation for the whites and Maine.
Well, that's right, physically. And then there's things like hitchhiking. I mean, if I admit to having hitchhiked back in the 70s or something, which I probably shouldn't do on the radio because my kids are listening, but things like that. I mean, I would never do that in regular life, and I didn't think anything of it on the trail. So there was a lot of new experiences that weren't necessarily comfortable, but were very rewarding.
Yeah. Did you hitch by yourself?
Oh yeah, many, many times.
Wow. And that you never felt threatened by any of that either?
Never. In fact, I don't think I ever waited more than 5 minutes. I mean, I'm an old lady. I'm not a threat to anybody. I would get picked up sometimes by the very first car that came. That happened more than once.
I'm sure. It happened a few times for me. I'm an old guy. Obviously, I don't provide a threat either. I look like a decrepit old guy as well at the time. But did you find also when you get in the car, they immediately wind the window down because you stink?
Oh, always. Yeah.
That was funny. The other thing actually you mentioned on the trip was that you really properly cooked, didn't you? You did dehydrated food. The rest of it were pouring into bags. Did you do that all the way through?
No, I did it sort of intermittently, and right. I had some resupply boxes sent to myself, and so something that I do normally in real life is I do boundary waters trips, boundary water canoe area wilderness in Minnesota, which means being out for like a week or so at a time. Right. Although you can carry heavier stuff because you're just portaging, you're not carrying everything long distance on your back, and so for years and years I've dehydrated my own food and made sort of meals and stuff that are in a and then vacuum pack them and stuff like that. So I used that system to sort of supplement things. I started out with whole meals, and then I just got simpler and simpler. I ended up really just having my kids send me, packets of like freeze-dried chicken or beef or things like that, and also dehydrated vegetables that I had done that I could then add to things like ramen that you're eating on the trail and stuff like that.
I never had ramen once.
Is that right?
Never once.
Well, I hadn't had it in 40 years. Nothing I'd never eaten in 40 years was Spam. And
I had Spam as well, yeah. Now, I thought that we'd originally met in Gatlinburg, but you reminded me yesterday that we met in a very, very crowded shelter about 10 miles out of Fontana Dam. And the reason you remember is I'd lost my sleeping bag.
That's right.
Yeah. Was I complaining a lot then?
Well, yeah, you were. The way I remember is you were really mad at yourself for having left your sleeping bag, and it was also cold. And I think there was a young man that gave you a piece of Tyvek or something so that you could have at least have wind protection.
That was lovely. I'll tell you what they did. Somebody gave me a Tyvek so I didn't get cold from the floor. Mm-hmm. And then 3 or 4 of the guys gave me those. The sitting pads.
Yeah, the butt pads. Yep.
I had something, and it really helped. And I think to a degree, that was what I remembered from that particular evening, where all these youngsters gathered round me and tried to make my evening better because I was miserable as sin. I tell you, I really was. And those youngsters really, really helped. And I was so inspired by those young people. Did you have similar experiences with them?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the trail community would, any time. I mean, I saw people give away food, offer clothing. I had an extra water filter for someone, luckily, like the O-ring for the Sawyer Squeeze.
Right.
Everybody's in it together. That community is so supportive. That was one of the coolest parts of doing the trail at all.
Yeah, you gave me actually some dehydrated fruit, and
oh, did I?
Yes, and I when I was listening again to the interview, I said, and it kind of exploded on your tongue. It was fantastic. I can't remember what it was. It was dehydrated.
I think it was cantaloupe or something weird, wasn't it? Or was it mango? I don't know.
I thought it was mango, actually. Yeah, I thought it was mango. Yeah. So, and those early miles, because I say we met quite early on, so I thought it was about getting into a rhythm. Your hike has to get into a rhythm. Did you find that the hike became easier once you worked out what that rhythm was?
Oh, yeah, I think so. I mean, for me, at the beginning, the hike became easier just as I got into shape. I just, you just get in better cardiovascular shape, and it became easier as I went. It also, and there were some things I had to do. One is that I actually had about 4 or 5 different tramilies, trail families, because I was slow enough that most of the kids are going to outstrip me in miles and stuff eventually.
Yeah.
But I took a lot of zeros. I hiked as much as I wanted to. And sometimes at the beginning of the day, I didn't even know for sure how long I was going to hike. So rather than have a specific goal, I might have a goal where I'll either stop at this shelter or the tent site beyond it, or whatever. And so then there were times when I remember early on shooting for, this was just in the first few days or maybe the first week. I thought, well, I'm going to go, I don't think it was 9 and a bit. And I ended up going about 15 and feeling good. And I thought, yes, I'm getting my legs.
Yeah.
But I didn't plan
feeling.
A lot. Yeah, it is. It's a lovely feeling.
Did you lose weight? Because the women don't seem to lose as much weight as men.
I lost about 25 pounds.
Oh, did you?
Yeah.
I lost 50.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
I lost 60 first time.
Sure.
But then we did meet up in Gatlinburg, and in fact and Standing Bear Farm, and I actually thought around that time that you, me, Ugg, and Sleprock, Ron Sleppy, I think his name was, Sleprock, we were sort of semi-forming a tramily, weren't we?
Yes,
We'd see each other in the evening sun.
Yes.
But people always drift in different directions. What was your experience like with those tramilies? Because you say they were faster than you. Did you regret losing them, or did you try to keep up with them?
So I had different experiences with that. I hiked with a couple of kids, and I refer to 20-somethings as kids because I'm so much older than that. But I got really attached and got used to hanging out with people several different times, and it was always sad to lose them. In some cases, they ended up going ahead of me, but then I also had the experience of literally 1,000 miles later running into them again.
Isn't that extraordinary?
It is. It's just extraordinary from Virginia to like New York or something. And I ended up, hanging out with some of the same people that I hadn't seen from that long ago. Another thing that broke it up was when I went home for 2 weeks in May. So you go off the trail for 2 weeks, you come back to the point you left off. You don't know a soul.
That's right.
Everybody you knew is well ahead of you by then. So I mean, it just had to keep forming and reforming. But I mean, that's kind of like what happens in life anyway. I mean, you take a job and you have a set of colleagues, and then you take a different job and you miss the people you used to work with, but there's another set. So that happened a lot.
You never felt the need to push harder to keep up with the tramily, though, did you? You just stayed with the family, and organically they disappeared.
That's right. I made the decision early on. I mean, I really felt like if I tried to push for miles for any reason, including to keep up with somebody else, that I would be likely to injure out. And in fact, I got shin splints at one point and had to sit out for 4 full days to recover from it. And anytime I tried to push for miles, I just didn't push 4 miles. I decided I had to hike my own hike, and if that meant being out of contact with people that I would really love to have been with, then that's just the cost.
Yeah, well, it's got to be your own hike. I saw so many people push themselves too hard, and I did it myself a few times, unfortunately. And you tend to pay for it, don't you? I think your body tells you what you should be doing, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I saw even I saw a young woman who had done the PCT last year, who started out on the AT and just started out doing 16-mile days. And a week into the hike, I met her at noon at a shelter, and she had a brace on her leg. She was done for the day, and I think she got off the trail. Just too much, too fast.
I think that's one of the things that if there's one piece of advice you give anybody, it would be do not start too fast.
Yeah.
You think you can do more, and you probably can do more, but you shouldn't, because you could very well knock yourself out. And you mentioned you got the shin splints. You also saw urgent care a few times, didn't you?
Twice, yeah.
What happened?
Yeah, well, I got a really bad poison ivy reaction. And that was in New York. And, it's amazing how simple things become very complicated. So to find an urgent care and find a pharmacy and hitchhike in and get an appointment, and you don't have cell service and all of that. So I went to an urgent care, and I got I got steroids, I got prednisone, but I think I was undertreated. They only gave me 5 days worth. So at the end of 5 days, I still had blisters that were leaking and spreading. And so I ended up calling my primary care person back in Minnesota, who agreed to call in a prescription out of state. And so then I had to get back into a town again and pick up the prescription for the medicine again. So that was the poison ivy fiasco. I still actually have scars from where I had poison ivy reaction.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it was pretty pronounced.
How did it happen? Do you know how it happened?
What I think happened, well, I remember I got really good at recognizing poison ivy, but there were places in Pennsylvania and New York where poison ivy was actually hanging into the trail. I mean, it was right on the edges of the trail. You could and if they were large leaves and leaning into it to the trail, you could almost not avoid them. And I think the way where I got the poison ivy, I think my hiking pole probably went into some poison ivy and then bumped against my leg. That's how I think I got that.
Amazing.
The other urgent care visit was I got a little abrasion on my shin above my ankle and didn't notice it. It was under my sock, and in a nice warm environment where germs can grow. And I didn't realize. I mean, it was just a little abrasion. I didn't realize it, but it became an infection, and it got fluid behind it, and it was about 3 inches across and changed color. It looked like a bruise and stuff. And that became cellulitis, and it took me 8 days to get to an urgent care, because that was where I was kind of out in the middle of nowhere. And so I ended up on antibiotics for that, and that cleared it up.
Yeah, and that cleared it up. There was no problem with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're lucky there.
Oh yeah.
So, and since I got back, and in fact for the last month or so of my hike, I noticed that you had considerable Facebook exposure. Did you find that the encouragement on Facebook was helpful? And I must say that I was always warmed by the encouragement that I got, so I wanted to give a positive shout out to Facebook once more, because I saw that there were so many people supporting you, and you could see the further up the trail you were getting on your posts, the more people, not so much they were surprised that you were doing well, but they were, well, maybe they were thinking, oh my gosh, she's going to do this, and they were very positive. Did you find that help on your trail?
Absolutely. I really enjoyed that part. And I mean, there were groups of people, because I had just retired, so I had a set of colleagues, and I told everybody that I worked with, I told them I was planning on hiking the trail. And by the way, my friends and colleagues were split about 50-50 between that's a really cool thing to do and you've lost your mind completely. And so people started more and more people were sort of watching. I would post, pictures, a lot of the views and where I was and stuff like that. And sometimes I wouldn't have service for a few days, but I just kind of posted as I went. And more people were watching. And I found that very supportive and very helpful.
I agree. I think it's a wonderful thing. And did you? We actually only saw one bear on the trip. We saw no moose, one bear, loads of snakes. Did you see many wildlife?
Yeah, so I saw a total of 5 bears. I saw a cute little baby peeking out under a bush, and then I saw a huge bear. Actually, the south end of him going north. He was just hauling butt down the trail when I saw him. Right. And then I saw a mother bear with cubs, and I actually got a video of them. So that was fun.
Yeah.
And then I saw whole bunches of moose poop, including some that looked shiny. I swear I must have interrupted a moose.
It looked like a moose latrine, didn't it?
Yeah,
I remember.
Yeah, there were some places that were just piles and piles of moose poop. So but I did not lay eyes on a moose. Probably the coolest thing I saw is a bobcat, though. I saw a quite tall gray bobcat that was, and I was following it down the trail. It was just walking up the trail, and I was walking behind it. It was very cool.
I followed a porcupine down the trail. and videoed that as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you mentioned the ticks earlier on. Did you come across many ticks on you?
I did permethrin on all my clothes. I even redid them part way. And some of the clothes I started out with, I actually sent away to be really permethrined, And I actually only saw like 2 ticks on the trail. One was crawling on my pack and another one was crawling on my bandana. I never found any on my body at all. Wow. And I've never had any symptoms. So I'm kind of a believer in permethrin.
Yeah, I bet you are. So last question. Now you're back home, newly retired. What are you going to do to top the AT? What's your next adventure?
I'm not even thinking about trying to top it. I think this was a unique experience that I don't think anything else will be exactly like that.
So that's what I thought. And
then you went and did it again, right?
I said I would never hike again as long as I live. Yeah. Ever since then, I've been on the Camino, I've done the AT, and I've done 2 attempts at the John Muir Trail. So I don't think I'm done yet. I got a funny feeling I might go back on the AT at some stage in the future as well, because I just think it's a magical trail. And one of the things I was very aware of, that my journey this time would be different to my journey last time.
Right.
So everyone has a different journey, and yours is a different journey to mine, even though we shared some of the trail together. So
that's
kind of
right.
Interesting.
And I'm one who will never say never. I'm not interested in hiking right now, but after some recovery period. But I agree with you that the AT is a magical place. It was a wonderful experience.
Well, I'm so glad I love you to have met you, obviously, and I'm so glad that you've come on the show to tell us about it. You were a lot of fun on the trail, and I once again listening back this morning, I did say after we spoke when I was on the podcast, I said that you had a constant smile on your face, and I know once again people can't see you now, but you're smiling again now.
Yeah. Well, it was lovely meeting you too, Steve.
And it was good fun, and hopefully we'll speak again sometime.
Yep.
Cheers, then.
Yeah.
Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.
It was interesting to me that one of her takeaways was the realization of how little we actually need in our lives. You carry everything on your back for 6 months and you're going to get a similar reaction. I'm still surrounded by stuff. In fact, it's even more in my face right now as I'm unpacking everything in my new home. I keep picking things up and saying to myself, what on earth did I buy that for? Lady Di and the rest of us who go through this trip find that we can survive quite comfortably with less stuff. Let's face it, that is not a bad thing to learn. Now it's Tina Dunaway and her very personal story of her journey this year. As you'll quickly hear, I found it difficult to come up with questions for Tina and instead let her tell what happened without much prompting from me. Here's Tina. Right, we're on with Tina Dunaway, another of the Mighty Blue class of 2019. Hi Tina, how are you?
Hey Steve, how are you?
Well, I'm okay, and I've just actually explained to Tina. I normally prepare questions for this, and Tina, you ended your hike after about, I believe, 600 miles, didn't you?
That's correct. I actually don't remember exactly what town it was in now, but it was right, like to pick the first 200 miles into Virginia.
Right. Okay. Now, and I do know the reason. Can you tell everybody why because you were hiking with your daughter at the time, I believe, weren't you?
Yeah, I was. So, my journey started out way back in March 1st.
Sure.
And my plan all along, even when I started out March 1st, that my daughter was going to meet me out there when she finished her semester in school. So that was right around the first week of May, I believe.
Okay.
And so she joined me and we hiked for about 2 weeks or so. And when we came off the trail to resupply,
right,
we came off the trail in Virginia, which was a mile from where that unfortunate incident happened on the trail,
right,
where there was a murder and then 2 other people were injured.
Right.
And it's funny because the person that obviously was accused of this, I met him in North Carolina.
Oh, did you?
And
oh my gosh.
And I did, and I spoke with him briefly, but he was staying at one of the shelters that I was camping at, and I got to witness kind of some of the badgering he was doing to other hikers.
Did he threaten you at all? Did he threaten you?
He did not. He did not. I briefly had an encounter with him where I basically might have said hi or something, and then I was staying in a tent. And so I kind of was off to myself anyways. Sure. And, after, setting up your tent and everything for the evening, I was just kind of listening to some of the conversations going on at the shelter. And so he was being kind of aggressive with some of the other hikers. But at this point, I already knew that he was on the trail and that he was showing up at various places. And so that was my first encounter, it was my only encounter with him personally.
Right. You'd actually heard of him, and then you met him. Did you know who he was when you met him?
I didn't. Well, I guess I kind of put two together. Like I saw him being kind of aggressive with other hikers. And then, anytime I have internet, I'm trying to follow, kind of keep in touch with the hiking blogs, because that's how a lot of hikers communicate while they're out there. And so we kind of knew at the time, that this person was on the trail. And then I had this encounter with him. And then, of course, didn't see him after that. And then after that point, after not seeing him, then, following the blogs, we heard that he was taken off the trail and he was sent home by the hiker yearbook guy and Odie, and he was gotten a bus ticket, and he was sent on his way, and he got a hotel stay and a free meal, and off he went. Yeah. Well, then he resurfaced in Virginia, and it wasn't until I got to resupply and I had my daughter with me that when we got into town, the reason why it took us so long to get into town is because of what was going on the trail. And come to find out after we got into town that occurred a mile from where we were.
Oh my gosh.
And it really, I feel like I can deal with stuff like this pretty well, but I was trying, my daughter, on the other hand, she had already had her pack chewed up by a bear 4 days earlier.
Oh my gosh.
And there was a bear outside our tent over in the Grayson Highlands. And so she part of it's her fault that she left some she says it was unscented suntan lotion in her pocket. Sure. And we emptied all our packs and hung them up in trees. And I've been doing that all along, not having any problems, but I hang them empty. And so she must have forgot that was there. And when we got to the Grayson Highlands, we already knew that there was bear activity there. So we knew to be extra cautious. Sure. So she must have forgot that was in there. And then we heard the bear at 2 a.m, and he was right there outside our tent. So when we got up the next morning, I got her packed down, and it was just torn to pieces.
Dear me. So when you heard what had happened, did you decide immediately to leave the trail, or what was the thought process at the time?
Well, this was my daughter's first experience with this kind of hiking, and her goal was to be on the trail with me for 3 months and to stay out with me the whole summer and kind of go back home about 2 weeks to a month before her next school year was supposed to start. And I was kind of skeptical that she would hang out with me that long, but I was hoping. And then this kind of happened, and I think that just kind of made her, I think she was a little nervous, a little scared. And, we had the bear thing out there, and then this happened 2 days later. And so I think she was a little skeptical at this point. And so I wanted to be more supportive of her and not put myself first. And so when she decided she wanted to go home, I said, well, then I'll just go home with you. I mean, I'm not going to just send you on a bus ticket and home. So I went home with her. And then, as everything else, life starts happening and things come first, and you have to start prioritizing what you need to do. And so I didn't get to go back out.
Did you intend, but when you took her home, when you went home with her, did you intend to go back out again?
I was going to play it by ear. So I had the intent to go back out. So this would have been my second time off the trail since I started in March, because the second week of March, when we had that bitter cold weather coming out of
well, I was in a different place.
Mountain crossing.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, you were in a different place.
Yeah.
But it was so cold, and I was recovering from bronchitis when I even started the trail, and I have kind of exercise-induced asthma. So that just triggered, I was struggling, even though I had inhalers with me, I was struggling 3 days prior to going into Savannah, Georgia. So I ended up going to an ER, and my O2 saturations were like 70%.
Which is not good, is it? No, it's not good at all.
No, that's not good especially when you're up in altitude and you're doing all that. So I actually went home for 5 days and then came back.
Right.
And so, by this time, my husband was kind of getting nervous. He's like, all right, you're going to go back out again. What are you going to do? Sure. And that kind of thing. And so I kind of decided to I can always go do it again. And I will go do it again. It may be in sections. I think this was a fluke that happened on the trail. Yes. I think in general, the people out there are very, very good people. And, how long has the Appalachian people been doing this on the Appalachian Trail? So statistically, this is like very low. Yeah. But when you know that, people don't necessarily that don't know about this kind of thing and about hiking and being on the trail, they don't look at it that way. They see it from because even prior to coming on the trail in March, just like you and everybody else, and I know you've asked this, everybody asked this question: are you going to take a gun? What are you going to do? There's murderers out there, and I'm like, hold the phone. No, it doesn't always happen.
So your experience then, obviously, it must have jarred you a tremendous amount when that happened. And I think it jarred everybody on the trail. We were all shocked as a community, but until that time, were you feeling quite comfortable in your hiking, or was this something that, you were not? Were you happy to be going home, or, I mean, how are you feeling when you quit, when you actually stopped?
I felt, I for a while after I quit, I was just like, I wish, I just felt bad. Like I really wanted to be out there. Sure. I think the physical aspect really wasn't a big problem for me. Like I didn't really struggle physically at all the whole time I was out there. I will say the emotional aspect or the mental aspect was tough at times. It was tough for me. Dealing with the rain, that took a toll on me. When all my stuff was wet, even when I tried the hardest to keep it dry, that took a toll on me. And sometimes, as much as that's a social trail, and there's all these people out there, there's a lot of time when there's isolation. And so that kind of played a little bit in my head as well. Cause I didn't really get an established family, trail family, sure. Early on. And so quite a few days I was hiking by myself. And that's all well and good. But it's kind of like dominoes when you start stacking up things and you've got the weather that's playing a part. Pouring down rain, because this is your second time doing it. So, yeah. So, that kind of, it's mentally tough.
Interestingly, funnily enough, when you started a few days after me. I started the 26th of February and you were, say, 1st of March. I was very surprised in those early miles, to be honest, throughout most of my hike, how alone we often were. I always thought the bubble must catch us up eventually, but I didn't feel to me like the bubble really called us up. I mean, tons of people overtook us, but we always felt that we always thought there would be that many more. But there was often days, even Trigger and I, 1,500 miles into the journey, we were thinking, where is everybody? And people, if people say the AT is too crowded, it really isn't too crowded, is it?
It isn't. It is not. And that's one of the things I struggled with, because after getting out there and being out there and doing the 600 miles that I did, like I did not, and like you and people saying how social it was, and that you'll be struggling to find time to be by yourself. And so like, I didn't experience that. I found a lot more isolation than I thought there was going to be.
And was it more than you wanted as well?
I think so. Yeah, I was hoping to be connected a little bit more, and that may have happened had I stayed out there a little bit longer. It just, but it didn't happen early on for whatever reason. And, because a lot of the people were younger than me and they were hiking faster than me, and, I wouldn't have been able to keep up. So I never found that one person or a couple people that we kind of could just go together and we had the same pace and so on and so forth. So that didn't happen early on.
Did you end up with a trail name?
Oh, well, yeah, my trail name was Kokopelli, but that's kind of what I gave myself before I even started.
Kokopelli? What?
It's a little Indian guy. He plays the flute, and it's, it stands for life and fertility, I think, in the Indian community. Oh. And it's just it's a little symbol. And I just have a lot of them at my house. And so that's kind of why I gave my name myself. And actually, I did hike with a girl for a couple of days who had the same trail name as me.
Oh my gosh, how unbelievable. Yeah. That's incredible.
I know, right?
Yeah, so your takeaway then obviously was clouded obviously by the terrible murder, but was the trail what you hoped it would be?
It was, yeah. I mean, I gained a lot. I learned a lot about myself.
Sure.
I learned about a lot of my strengths, a lot of my weaknesses, and what, I hope to improve next time, or even if I were to stay out there longer, what I can improve going forward.
Yeah.
But I think it was great. It was everything I expected, and there were some things that I didn't quite expect, but I kind of knew that no one day is going to be the same. It's something that changes every day. And it's just something that's part of it when you go out there and be out in the wilderness like that for that long period of time.
Sure.
You have to learn to adapt to anything that happens,
Sure.
really.
So you say you found some weaknesses. What did you find in yourself that you perhaps were surprised with that was a weakness for you?
I was surprised that I thought I was going to be more emotionally stronger than what I was.
Wow.
Like I thought, but this was my first really true long distance hike. I mean, the longest I've ever been out was probably 40 days on a trip, but I was with a close group of people.
Sure.
So you didn't experience a lot of things that you would, here on the Appalachian Trail or any long distance trail like that. And so, yeah, I mean, I thought I was going to be stronger emotionally than I was. Physically, I kind of was right there where I thought I was going to be, and didn't think one way or the other. I just knew that, hey, I can get through this part. This is not a problem.
When you look at it, you did 600 miles. That's a heck of a long way anyway, isn't it? And it makes it gives you a real sense of how far the whole journey is, isn't it, really?
Absolutely.
I tell you, when you do cross that halfway line, if you do it another time, you cross that halfway line, you think, oh my gosh, I've got the same amount to do again. It is unbelievable.
Yeah.
You think, I've come a long way already. And yet 600 miles is a heck of a journey. So, I think you did great doing 600 miles. And you probably wouldn't have stopped had circumstances, the murder not happened, I presume.
I think I would have gone a lot farther. I don't know, how much further, but I think I would have continued on.
Right.
So, yeah, I mean, I was like after 100 miles at the North Carolina border where the sign for the 100 miles, I was thinking, I just did only like 1/16 of the whole trail.
Yeah, doing fractions and percentages of the trail is not a good idea, is it?
I know, right?
After the first 3 days, you said you'll say I've done 1% of the trail so far. That seemed a long way to me. So it's quite something. Well, look, I'm glad you came back. I'm glad I wasn't nervous of calling you, but I knew what had happened. I knew because I saw a post on Facebook, and I thought how sad that was, obviously for you. But if you're going to go back again, I take a lot of heart from that because it means you enjoyed the experience and you want a bit more of it.
Oh, I did. I wouldn't let that tragic incident be defining at all, because that was just an incident in time. It could have happened anywhere. Sure. And it certainly doesn't cloud my vision of what the trail is. I think it's still a great place. It's a great thing, and I want to do more of it. And
cool.
And I will get back out there.
Okay. Well, if you do, let me know. And I will. And I appreciate you talking to me. All right?
All right. Thanks. I appreciate you connecting with me. It's been great talking to you.
Yeah, and you.
All
Cheers.
Right.
Bye.
All right.
That must have been an emotional roller coaster for her. Being so close to such a sickening event must have raised doubts within her. I'm glad that she made the decision that was best for her. But I'm also happy that she won't let it define her view of the trail, and she'll be back on the trail in the future. And for those of you who worry about the trail being crowded, there's your answer. Solitude is definitely achievable if you want it. I know that I mentioned our new show, Just a Section Hiker, which will be starting in the coming months last week on the show. I wanted today to thank all of you who have embraced the idea and already reached out to Julie to be interviewed. She's working like a Trojan to get segments recorded, and we've been lucky enough to receive permission to use this theme song, Through the Woods, from the Okie Dokie Brothers. I'm going to play a short snippet now, just to give you a flavour.
And I'll spread the word, and you beat the drum. We'll round up the troops and get the gang to come. And we'll leave the streets and these neighborhoods, head over the river and through the woods.
It's really nice, isn't it? And thanks to the guys for giving us permission to use their song. You should check them out on YouTube, where you'll find more great stuff. They're under the Okie Dokie Brothers. Thanks, guys. Finally, this week, we have Chapter 7 of Paul Stutzman's Hiking Through. where he explains the relevance of a butterfly sighting. I'll see you next week. Chapter 7. Butterflies. The aroma of frying bacon welcomed us into the fellowship hall at First Baptist Church of Franklin. We surely did appreciate the church's mission of feeding us poor, hungry, homeless wanderers. Friendly banter between hikers and pancake flippers started the day on a pleasant note. We met our daily calorie requirement with just one meal and were driven back to our motel, where the short yellow bus waited for more passengers. Ron was in peak storytelling form, and our ride back to Winding Stair Gap passed too quickly. At the parking lot, a repeat of yesterday's reunion, with different faces, brought us up to date on all the trail gossip. Ahead of us that day were Siler Bald and Wire Bald. Normally, bald brings to mind a hairless head, but in this case it meant a treeless mountain summit. A stone tower topped Wire's 53-40-foot summit. We climbed the tower for an astounding view. Mountain ranges marched in every direction. Wondering which of these we would be crossing in the days to come, we identified the highest mountain in the distance and suspected that was probably our destiny. A lake sparkled in the distance. The Little Tennessee River flowed freely until 1942, when some great thinker believed the river should be harnessed to produce electricity. A giant concrete plug, 480 feet high and 2365 feet wide, had turned the innocent little river into a 10,000-plus acre pond for the pleasure of humanity. Many times these dams are foisted on us as flood control devices. Perhaps we shouldn't be building or living in areas that flood so quickly. Maybe I'm too cynical, but I believe to accurately understand the motivation behind the building of these dams, you'll need to follow trails that are marked with dollars, trails that lead to some politician's doorstep. But this sad state is only temporary. The plug is, after all, man-made. Everything man builds eventually deteriorates. I'm no kin to Nostradamus, but my prediction is that someday all the great and small rivers of the world will flow freely as God intended. Nor am I an anarchist or a wacko environmentalist, but only a voice in the wilderness speaking for rivers wishing to flow freely. It was Wednesday. Our goal was to reach Fontana Village by noon Saturday. Sailor had a mail drop at the post office there, and I had a bounce box waiting for me. Before leaving Springer Mountain, I had mailed a box with extra food and supplies to this location. I would resupply from the box and then mail, or bounce, it to a location approximately a week ahead of us. We wanted to arrive at the post office before closing on Saturday, so we pushed for extra miles, running on energy from our huge breakfast. We put 19 miles behind us, our biggest day thus far, but the sun was setting and we had not found a suitable camping spot. Finally, at Tellico Gap, we had no choice but to stealth camp, setting up in an area not meant for camping. On uneven ground, beside a series of power lines running through the gap, we settled in for the night. The following morning, we stopped at the Nantahala Outdoor Centre, which houses an outfitter, a small grocery, a whitewater rafting centre, and a cosy restaurant hanging over the river's waters. Hamburgers at River's End Restaurant are legendary, and with our burgers, we downed several energy drinks, fortifying ourselves for the climb we knew was ahead. Chihuahua Bald was 8 miles away, a long, tough uphill climb. We stopped 1 mile short of the Bald. Too tired to set up our tents, we braved the Sassafras Gap shelter that night. Friendly people, a covered porch with a skylight, and only minor concerns about resident mice made my second shelter stay considerably better than the first. The next morning, Friday, it turned cold and windy. 6 miles brought us to a small clearing at Stickoa Gap, where several men had set up a grill and offered hikers hot dogs, candy bars, chips and beverages. The Good Samaritan this time was a former thru-hiker. Those additional calories helped us knock off the next 12 miles quickly, and we knew we'd meet our deadline. We were less than 5 miles from the Fontana post office and the comforts of the Fontana Lodge when we stopped for the night just past Walker Gap. I pitched Big Agnes in a clearing only 3 feet from a small stream. The little creek was so close I could almost filter water without leaving my tent. I settled in for the night, relaxing into the murmuring of the brook, the sound a balm for my tired body and spirit. I thought I could hear the soft voice of God in the music in the brook. Apostle, did you see me today? Yes, God, and thank you for the springtime. The valleys and mountains were bursting with new life. At higher elevations, buds were starting to appear. In the gaps, flowers waved as I walked by. The earthy smell of spring was everywhere. How about the butterfly? Did you see the butterfly? Dear God, that was awesome. It stopped me in my tracks. That morning, a beautiful butterfly had floated above my head, sailed ahead on the path, then circled back and fluttered around me. As I walked, it drifted along beside me for a while. I had watched it with amazement. Yes, God, and today I remembered that other butterfly you sent my way. Mary had loved butterflies, especially monarchs. The monarch is sometimes called the milkweed butterfly because most of its life cycle takes place on milkweed plants. Every year, my wife drove out into the country, located a stand of milkweed and searched for a caterpillar marked with bright yellow and black stripes. The chosen caterpillar would be housed in a mason jar, topped with screen, furnished with twigs and plenty of milkweed leaves. Then the waiting and watching began. For about 2 weeks, the caterpillar did nothing but eat and eliminate. But then the excitement started. Mary never missed it, and she made certain we didn't either. Her excited call would round up the family, and we'd watch that caterpillar start to spin. Hanging upside down from a twig or the bottom surface of the screen, the caterpillar spins until the exterior skeleton slips off and the chrysalis forms a jade-green shell. For the next several weeks, the chrysalis hung immobile. If we went on vacation during that time, the jar of hope travelled in the front seat with us. As the butterfly developed inside, the green sheath slowly changed colour and became thin and almost transparent. When the chrysalis finally started to move gently, Mary again gathered our family to watch the drama unfold. Soon, a wrinkled, deformed butterfly emerged. For several hours, this sad-looking creature would hang on to its former home, slowly moving its wings up and down in an effort to dry and strengthen them. Then came the ceremony of release. To the front porch we all went, and with Mary's encouraging words, "Fly, little butterfly," the now beautiful creature was set free. In the week before Mary left us, she spent both days and nights in a chair in the living room, enduring considerable pain, not wanting to move between the chair and bed. Finally, we convinced her to move to her bedroom. As I lifted her from the chair to a wheelchair, somebody exclaimed, "Look out there!" Outside our glass door, a tree branch curved over the balcony and a caterpillar inched along that branch, 10 feet from the ground. In 17 years of living in that house, we had never seen a caterpillar on that tree. None had been there since that day. This little messenger crept along the branch, then onto a smaller twig, inching closer to the sliding door. I wheeled Mary over so she could get a better view. I had no doubt God was showing us that Mary was going through her own metamorphosis. She would be set free to fly away, just like all the butterflies she had released into the sunshine. I settled Mary in her bed, then went back to find the caterpillar, but it had disappeared. Later, I related this little story to our pastor. He did not seem surprised. He said he had often seen God reveal himself, especially at difficult times. Following Mary's funeral, I gave some of the flower arrangements to the local nursing home and several friends. I still had a living room full of flowers, so I decided that those would go to my sisters and Mary's friends who had been so helpful during her illness. The day after the funeral, a friend of Mary's brought me a twig with a chrysalis bound to it. I stuck the twig into a flower arrangement. One of my sisters had told me she had never seen a butterfly emerge, so I would give her this one to enjoy. That evening, I fell asleep in my chair in the living room. At 2 a.m, an unfamiliar sound woke me. A mysterious fluttering whisper was coming from the assortment of plants and collectibles on the shelf above the kitchen cabinets. I stood dumbfounded as a monarch butterfly emerged from the plants and danced around me in the living room. It had abandoned its chrysalis before I could deliver it to my sister. I watched in wonderment, not quite believing what I was seeing. Now it was my turn to grant freedom. The monarch did not seem eager to leave, but was attracted to the light in the living room. I turned off that light and turned on the kitchen light. Follow the light, little butterfly. It came to the kitchen. I shut off the kitchen light and flipped on the light in the foyer. The butterfly followed. I opened the front door and snapped off the foyer light while turning on the porch light. Go, little butterfly, fly away, you're free. The butterfly winged through the front door and disappeared. In my tent beside the brook, I remembered the unexpected caterpillar and the night visit of the monarch butterfly. And before I realised it, I was talking aloud, talking with that voice of God in the brook. Correction, I was talking to the voice, because once I got started, I was on a roll and didn't give much chance for reply. Yes, God, I understood the symbolism that night. You set Mary free. So you were there all along? I often questioned whether you cared about what was happening to us. If you care, why did she suffer so and die? I didn't want glib, churchy lines. I wanted answers. Is there a reason for all this sickness and death? If you are in control of everything, why is the world in such a mess? Was he listening? Was he there? I need to know if you are firmly in command. I can make a case that you do not control events and everything happens at random. But if I can convince myself that you do have a plan, then maybe I could believe Mary died for a good reason. If God cared but let us suffer anyway, then I was angry and would be a bit brash with him. How can you know how much pain we went through? Do you know what it's like to lose a wife or a mum? Oh yes, you lost a son once, but you were only apart for 3 days. Even I could bear just 3 days of separation. An answer came back, cutting through my pent-up questions and frustration. You are missing the point, my dear apostle. A storm warned me of its rapid approach. Lightning crackled around the campsite and thunder rumbled and echoed through the mountains. The sound of raindrops drowned out my conversation with the brook. Another thunderclap seemed to shake the very ground under our campsite. God had apparently moved from the gentle brook to the powerful storm. Wow, God, you can talk loudly, I said at last, when I could speak again. You're a funny one, aren't you, Apostle? Created in your own image, I believe. Perhaps I'm missing the point, but that's why I'm out here. Sure wish I'd always hear you this clearly. Oh, and thanks for the butterfly today. I'll look for you tomorrow on the trail.